So Dewey wants to help do this by contrasting what he calls, on the one hand, the empirical method versus the non-empirical method. Now, Dewey's method, which he's calling the empirical method, begins with an integrated unity in experience, and other non-empirical methods, they begin with the products of reflection. This is what is sometimes referred to as the philosophical fallacy. So Dewey wants to do justice to the world as found, as encountered, and not try to say that the things which we discover and theorize about it already existed in the first place. So this would include a contrast between different kinds of experience, primary on the one hand and reflective on the other, and an acknowledgement that we begin with an integrated unity, an unanalyzed totality, that's not initially divided up into categories like subject and object, or mind and world, or experience and nature. In other words, these labels, subject, object, mind, world, experience, nature, all of these labels are things which theory comes up with. And the mistake is to take those labels and say, that's what really exists, or that was there from the beginning and it just took us a while to discover it. Okay? So what Dewey wants us to understand is that what experience is made of, or what it's like to be in the world, is so excessively rich, right, that experience will always outstrip knowing, right? Because whenever we know something, we have to delimit it, we have to select, we have to decide what counts and what doesn't count. And how do we make a selection? We make a selection based on some purpose that our inquiry has. So if I were to point to this painting behind me, and I would say, do you see the painting? Well, you already have done a bunch of selections to decide where the painting begins and where the brick wall ends, right? So that selective work was done in the past, and so now you just see it as a painting hanging on a wall. But that selective work is not there in nature prior to conception. It reflects the work that's already been done by us, okay, by interpretation, by language. What's more, Dewey's empirical method is very self-conscious about the reflective contents within it. So if you're self-conscious in this way, as a philosopher, you can be protected by that self-consciousness, and you can avoid artificial problems. You will also have, if you do this, some practical way to check your conclusions. So the upshot of this method for philosophic theory is that it expands a philosophy of nature beyond the merely physical or material, such as the quantitative or material picture of the natural world that's been handed down to us by modern philosophy. And philosophy of nature, on the other hand, becomes a theory of nature and culture, of nature and human experience. So we are now up to the third important way of breaking down this chapter, and that is the metaphilosophical point of doing philosophy in this way. So I've been going through the 3 M's, as I've called them. And the first one was what experience is, and the second was about why philosophical method should start empirically from experience. Now comes the larger metaphilosophical question, which is why philosophers should choose this method and this metaphysics. This is a question that he's addressed in other works too, such as Reconstruction and Philosophy. And in a sense, most of the hard work that Dewey had to do was located here, at least in this book, because no one in philosophy practically would willingly accept his innovations in metaphysics or in epistemology, without a good argument, that is, about why they should give up their presuppositions. So despite Dewey's statement that he knows no route to argue for this dialectically, Dewey does offer several reasons that one might want to try his approach. One reason he mentions is that the empirical method, at least the empirical as he understands it, is going to avoid 3 failures of philosophies that in the past have refused to connect theory on the one hand with practical everyday experience on the other. One failure is that it would avoid a failure of effort towards verification, right? Towards actually seeing whether or not philosophical ideas worked, whether they played a good role in future experience. And James talks about this at length. It would also avoid a failure of non-empirical philosophies to enrich or enlarge things in ordinary experience. Right? I mean, a really good philosophy should make you think differently about the world. It should make things more significant, more meaningful to you. Your philosophical understanding of them should enrich them, right? Not be some strange account over here. And third, it would avoid a failure which often happens when philosophy seems abstract and aloof and useless. And this, in a way, is a cultural problem for philosophy. And philosophers get jokes all the time, and philosophy majors get jokes all the time. You know, you tell someone that you're majoring in philosophy, and they say, "Oh, do you want fries with that?" or whatever stupid joke they make. Instead, Dewey says a philosophy should be judged, or the activity of philosophy should be judged on what it does for life, right? For everyday, ordinary, crude, gross, macroscopic experience, as he puts it. He's asking, is ordinary life experience made more luminous or more opaque? Is it more significant or more mysterious? Is it more controllable or less controllable? Right? And the other question he's asking is about who we are, what we are. Is ourself, is it life as a being, a human being, made more authentic or less? So there's very much of an existentialist sort of idea here, right? Because Dewey thought that alienation of the self, especially in modern jobs and modern life, which is sped up, and often jobs are very boring or mechanical or rote. Alienation of the self, Dewey argues, is the general result of philosophies that employ non-empirical methods, right, in order to pursue wholesale generalizations, permanent functions, permanent purposes, intrinsically eternal entities, right? So there are these different factors in life that can make us feel alienated, but Dewey says that some of those alienation factors come from philosophies that just seem like they have nothing to do with my life, that they have nothing to do with my experience, right? And a lot of people feel this way about philosophy. People feel this way about religion too, that what does it have to do with me? So Dewey's philosophy, he thinks, will be preferable to others based on the fact that it is intrinsically bound up with lived value, its ability to demonstrate that it is a philosophy that's adequate to where we are as people now, right? And that it's reflective of all of the values, all of the preferences, all of the hopes that we have at the outset. In other words, when we start doing philosophy. Right? We don't do philosophy in order to find out what we should value, although it can help us clarify what we do value and whether to. But philosophy is meant to help us understand where we are, what our starting point is in lived experience. So Dewey's empirical method has to be tried, he argues, because it's conscious of its historicity. It's conscious of the fact that theory has to start fully aware that it's already laden with interpretation. So there's no going back before or behind theory. Dewey does not think we can get back behind language, behind theory. But what he does say at the end, and the quote at the end is very important, and I highly recommend that you read it. He says that we can't escape our own take on experience. That's true. We all have takes on experience. We have culturally inherited takes. Right? We have takes that came from our parents or from our religion or from our culture and so forth. And he doesn't think that philosophy can get completely behind that or beyond that. But he does think that it contains a method of reflecting, of analyzing, of reconstructing our positions when we feel that they could be better, and that hopefully we can ameliorate and beautify experience in the process. So this is the end of the short lecture on Dewey's chapter 1 in Experience in Nature, Experience in Philosophic Method. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I look forward to talking to you about it. Thanks for listening.